Recently, you might have heard lots about Embergard. It might be because it's the hottest new holiday destination in the entire mortal realms, a city infested with warring factions baying for blood and riches. Or, potentially, it's the new Warhammer Underworld starter set, a delightful game in a box containing 2 warring factions baying for blood and riches. Today, I'll be showing you how to take this Warhammer Underworld's Embergard set and turn it into a bunch of really cool painted models that you can be proud to call your own. It might seem daunting at first, but together we'll go through each step, and by the end of it you'll learn that not only is it much easier than you thought, it's loads of fun too. So take your time, don't rush, and enjoy yourself. Let's get started. First things first, we'll need a workspace. Find a flat, sturdy table that's well lit to work from. Then I'm going to cover it to help avoid damaging it. I'll be using this cutting mat, but you can use some cardboard or some newspaper. In the Embergard box, you'll find 2 plastic frames, a blue one for the Stormcast Eternals and a green one for the Skaven. You'll also get a sheet of instructions that we'll need. So get these out of the box and onto the table. I like to keep the lid of the box next to me as I find it helpful when making my models. The rest we won't need until later, so you can store it out the way safely. Finally, you'll need a pair of plastic cutters. These can be very dangerous though, so you may need an adult to help if you're under 12. With everything we need here and our workspace ready, we can start assembling the models. It's worth having a look through the instructions to understand how each part goes together. Each of the 8 models will have its own number at the top left, and each separate part will be numbered individually. So the Stormcast leader Ardorn here is Model 1, and the parts used are Parts 1 and Parts 2. Let's see if we can find them on the sprue now. If you look around the edge of the sprue, you'll find each part is numbered. Like we saw in the instructions, to start building we need Parts 1 and 2. I found Part 1. It's this cape here, and now I need to remove it. To do that, I'll use the cutters. Find the flat edge of the cutters. When we snip out our models, the flat edge goes against the piece that we're cutting out, as it makes a nice clean cut. Then, put them in the palm of your hand and find a comfortable position to hold them in. Line up the cutters against where part 1 and the frame connect. Then, gently squeeze. This will cut through the plastic. Go around the part and do this with every connection point until the part is removed. I like to do this over the lid of the box, so if the part falls away, it will fall into the box and won't bounce underneath your table. Then do the same with part 2. Now with both parts removed, line them up like the instructions say and push them together. The pegs will line up and keep the other bits from falling apart. Amazing! Your first step is complete. Now follow the instructions, snipping and assembling as you go. And very shortly, you'll have your assembled Stormcast leader, Ardorn. We'll put him to one side and continue making our models until they are all completed. Once you have all your models built and popped on their bases, you have 2 fully built Underworld's warbands, ready to paint. Great stuff! Now let's move on to the next part, the painting. We'll use the same table as we've built the models on to paint over, but there's a few things we need to do before we even open a paint pot. First, let's clean the area up. Tidy any cutters or tools away safe and put your models and boxes away too. Then tidy up any used frames, plastic shavings or instructions, as we won't need them now, and small bits of plastic aren't very fun to accidentally lean on, so let's throw them away. Then we can cover the table to help in case we have a spill. It's also helpful to get some paper towels or some tissues ready to hand to help dry your brush and for any potential spills. We'll then need a water pot filled with some clean water. Then finally we'll need a palette to put the paint onto. I'll be using the Servo Skull palette, but some cardboard will do. With our paint station well lit, we're ready to start painting. Painting is one of the best parts of the Warhammer hobby, where you can really let your creative juices flow. However, if you've not painted Warhammer figures before, it can seem really scary, especially with how small the parts are and how detailed the models are too. But when you start painting, you'll learn that it's way easier than you thought. Whatever colours you choose, I'll show you the basics of painting now so you can get started. First of all, the undercoat. The undercoat is the first paint we put onto our models. This coat will help all the other paints we apply later to stick on. Today we'll be using Abaddon Black straight from the pot. Give the paint a shake and open it up. You can see the lip of the paint at the top, that's where we're going to get our paint from. Now we need to get a brush. I'll be using the small base brush today. Hold it like a pencil, near the ferrule, this metal bit that holds the bristles at the top. This will give you the most control available. Now dip your brush into the lip of the paint pot near the top, instead of dunking it in. When loading your brush, Load the bristles no more than halfway, like this. You want to avoid getting paint into the ferrule as it will make your brush fray over time. If you have too much paint, remove it onto your palette. You'll get a better application and will be able to use the excess paint later. Then choose a model to undercoat. I'll start with the Stormcast leader Ardorn as he's quite big and will give you a really good feel on how to apply the paint. Try and make sure that you are comfortable painting too. With your elbows or wrists on the table, you're nice and stable and won't slip around. You can always move the model around too, getting into all the small gaps and under the cloak. We'll apply one coat to the model fully. Take your time and apply more paint as you go. Make sure that you wash your brush as well after a few minutes to stop any of the paint from drying in the bristles. Go around the entire model, making sure that every section is covered with paint. You may find it easier to start in the middle of the body and work your way out, or start top to bottom. It's up to you how you apply the undercoat. You want to try and avoid thick areas of paint. If you notice any area where paint is covering up the details, use your brush and spread the paint around and move it into areas that aren't as filled. Again, clean your brush in the clean water to remove any paint and dry it with your paper towel. After about 10 minutes, this coat is dry. If you notice any areas that aren't covered or a little bit too thin, go in again with another coat. Now repeat this undercoat technique for all the other models you have. Congratulations! Now you have learnt how to undercoat. Let's move on to learning base coating and add some more colours. Base coating is a technique similar to undercoating, but instead of painting over plastic, you are adding a colour on top of the undercoat. The first colour we'll be using for this is Retributor Armour. The type of paints we will be using are called base paints. They are designed to be used for undercoating and base coating too, as they have a lot of pigment that give us a really solid coat. Like the undercoat, apply the paint by taking it from the pot and putting it onto the Stormcast's armour. If you notice any areas that are too thick, spread the paint around to stop it clogging up the details. By having this undercoat applied, we have given the colour a great foundation to stick to, allowing all the other colours to be smooth and solid. So it is really worth the time to do it. Now you have the Retributor Armour on and dry, we'll apply another base colour. Now we can add Kantor Blue to Ardorn's cloak. In this step we're going to show you how to thin your paints down. You can add a small amount of water to paint to get a really smooth finish. It can take an extra coat or two to get a really solid colour, but the effect is really nice and smooth. Take a small amount of Kantor Blue from the pot and put it directly onto the palette. Then dip your brush into the water. It's easier to put a small amount in first and add more as you go. Mix this directly into the paint in circular motions until you get a thinned consistency, like this. Then apply this over the cape in long, smooth motions. The paint shouldn't run like water though. You should be able to control it still with your brush. If you find it's too runny to control, add slightly more paint into the mix. When the cape is painted with one coat and you're happy with the consistency, apply a coat over the leather tabard too. You can see that the paint is slightly see-through with the first coat. This is why when the paint is dry, we'll apply a second coat to make the colour much stronger. Now we have a few colours down, we can start tidying up any of our mistakes. You can tidy up at any time. Some people like to do it after every stage and some at the end. But you do risk adding too much paint to a model, so it's best to do it either after a few paints or right at the end of the base coating stage. To tidy up and fix any mistakes, we just need to apply the original colour back over. For example, I've got a little bit of this Kantor Blue onto the gold armour. So I'll thin down some Retributor Armour and apply a small amount over the blue. You might only need to reapply a single coat, but some colours that are a little bit darker or much brighter might need a second coat. I'll tidy the rest up later when we're done. Now you're getting the hang of painting base coats, we'll use the exact same process for the next few steps. Our next colour is going to be Rakarth Flesh, and we'll be using this for the inside of the cloak and Ardorn's face as well. Now we'll move to a smaller brush to get into all the nooks and crannies. I'll be using a medium layer brush to do the job. Really take your time and reach all the areas you need to. I'd also recommend thinning this paint as it's a little bit thick. Amazing work! You've got your model almost done, so let's keep going. While we still have our medium layer brush to hand, let's quickly paint the handle of his axe. It's tucked right underneath his arm, so move the model and make it as easy as possible to reach. Handle wrappings and cloaks are a really easy way to add your own personal touch by changing the colour of them. Maybe a green or a blue would work really well. The choice is yours. Now we'll add the silver to the weapons and accessories with Leadbelcher paint. Use whichever brush you feel comfortable using, depending on what part you're painting. For instance, a big brush will really quickly paint the axe head, but a small one is going to be much easier to paint a belt buckle with. Just remember to clean your brushes whenever you've finished using them. Our model is almost finished. We've got only 2 more paints to go. Now we can paint the last base coat on Ardorn. We'll be using Steel Legion Drab for the leather straps, the fur belt and the base itself. Swap brushes as you need and take your time. If you've had any spillages or any mistakes, tidy them up with the correct paint now, as the next step will make this much harder to do. I've also painted the rim of the base with Abaddon Black. Ardorn looked amazing and you've done a great job. The final step we're going to apply will make him look even better with hardly any effort whatsoever. For our last step, we're going to be using a different kind of paint to the others, called a shade paint. When you give it a shake, you can hear that the consistency of this paint is slightly different to the others. It's much runnier. This is because shade paints are designed to run into the recesses and all the gaps of the model and help bring the details out. Get a large brush and take quite a bit of paint from the lip. Then, starting from the top of the model, cover everything but the inner cloak, reapplying paint to your brush as needed. This is a really quick and easy technique, but there's still a few things you need to look out for. Make sure you have enough paint on your brush so that the paint can run and flow into the model. If you have too little paint, then it can't do its job effectively. But also make sure that the paint hasn't pooled. That's when too much shade paint has settled into a gap and will drown out any of the details. You can see this has happened here. Grab a clean brush and absorb the excess paint with it. As we've noticed the pooling super early, it's easy to fix. It's always worth having a look over your model to check for pooling a minute or 2 after shading. Lovely stuff! You've painted Ardorn and you can use the techniques you've learnt today to paint the rest of the Emberguard watch too. Then they'll be ready to venture into the mines of Emberguard, ready to bash some Skaven. Speaking of which, let's paint their leader Zicket. We're going to be using the same core techniques of using a base paint to block in the colour and then a shade paint over the top. The first paint we'll use to paint Zicket is Steel Legion Drab. We'll start by painting his fur. I'd recommend a small brush to reach all the areas of the model, like the fur underneath the helmet and his shoulders too. Then paint the wood on his backpack and the weapon handle as well. There's a small amount of leather with Zicket's belt and pouch, so get those painted as well. We will also paint the base of the model this colour too, but you can do this now or after all the other base colours. I'm going to paint it after, as I'll be holding the model by the base and I don't want to rub any paint off. Now use Rakarth Flesh to paint his skin. Like last time, I'd recommend thinning this paint down with a little bit of water and using a smaller brush to get into all those hard to reach areas. Don't forget his ears, his mouth and his feet, as they are quite small and they're very easy to miss. I find when painting some areas, it's easier to be a little bit messy to start with and then clean it up afterwards. The tail is a really good example of this. With only a few paints, he's really coming together. Let's keep going. Next, we'll move on to Phoenician Purple. We're going to paint the cloth and his tongue, so use the right brush for what you're doing. Again, don't worry if you make any mistakes, as we can always tidy them up later after all the paints are dry. Our next paint will be covering the silver areas. I'm just going to check the box first to find out what areas I'll need to paint. Here you can see that his metallic fingers, his weapon and his eyes are silver. Leadbelcher will work straight from the pot and provide a really solid foundation. It also looks like the dish on his backpack is silver too, along with the pipes and the container. We'll move on to the gold next, but these metallics can be interchanged to add your own personal touch. Now move on to Balthazar Gold. This paint is a really lovely deep gold. It's almost bronze. I'll start with the canister on his weapon and then move on to the top part attached to the warpstone chunk. Then any of the strips of metals like the ones on his backpack too. There's also this little bit holding the warpstone gem on his chest. Don't worry though if you paint the gem itself, because we're going to paint it next. We'll use War Flesh to paint the various bits of warpstone and pipes. I've chosen this colour because it goes on really well with one coat from the pot and isn't too dark or too light. Take your time and with a small brush paint all the little bits and bobs, but remember it's really easy to tidy up any mistakes afterwards. If you prefer a lighter or a darker green, the choice is yours. Maybe your warpstone isn't even green. If you've missed any parts of the model or haven't painted the base yet, make sure to do that now, as we'll be applying our shade paint in our next step. Just make sure that all the paints are completely dry beforehand. Finally, we'll use Agrex Earthshade to shade the entire model with one coat. This helps tie all the other colours underneath together and make them look really good. Make sure to keep an eye out for any pooling again and fix it when you see it. After the shade is dry, Zicket is finished. Use all the paints we've used today to go through the rest of his buddies and you'll have 2 completely finished Underworld's warbands. So, with a few paints, some tools and a little bit of time, you've turned plastic frames into a set of amazing characters that you can be proud to call your own. You've learnt and mastered the basics. Now you can take your painting adventure wherever you want to. For more painting videos, head over to our YouTube channel. If you need a little bit more help, you can always head to one of our Warhammer stores where one of our friendly staff will help you. I hope you've enjoyed this video and we hope we'll see you again soon. See you later.